Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and we're continuing our top 100 games of all time. Today we're going through 40 down through 31. We are in the bottom half. We're going through some incredibly excellent games. Every single game from this point onwards, actually from like a video and a half ago onwards, is a 5 out of 5 for me. These are, well, they're great games. That's the whole point of this video. If you want to go ahead and see how this is compiled, some of the rules around this video, you can go ahead and check out the first 2 or 3 minutes of the very first video in the series. I go through all the various things I do to put this list together. Past that, throughout the course of this top 100 list, I am running a support drive for the channel. I'll have a link to that video down below as well. If you want to go ahead and check out my Patreon, my Ko-fi, YouTube membership, or if you just want to comment on that video and be eligible to win a full Oath1 All-In pledge, Master Universe pledge, and Zombicide Undead or Alive pledge. But with that, let's go ahead and start this list off, starting off with my number 40, which is going to be Encyclopedia from Holy Grail Games, which honestly is a little sad to say because Holy Grail Games is unfortunately not around anymore. But Encyclopedia, this is one of my favorite games. This game gives you, well, I don't even know how to describe this. The game gives you the idea of trying to go ahead and research various animals, then go ahead and log your researches and discoveries, and try to optimize your points around how you're trying to specialize in either the colors of certain cards or putting your cubes in certain types of cards. None of that probably makes any sense to you, but the basic idea is it's an action economy game. It's dice drafting. You're going to go ahead and have a bunch of dice, utilizing those dice to be able to go ahead and take various bonuses. But the thing about this game that gets me is going to be the chaining actions. You're going to have the center board over here that you're playing off of. You're going to have a bunch of species in the middle. You're taking actions to be able to go ahead and get money, get first place, to get these navigation tokens, to get these cards over here that you're going to utilize to be able to go ahead and start researching various attributes on the cards by going to this region over here. Then you're going to log the attributes by putting your cubes down over here, and you're going to get more bonus actions out of that. The thing that gets me on this game is that everything in the game, because I haven't even shown you this part over here, this center row over here is going to give you all these various experts in the game, various ways to give you additional bonuses or specialties in the game. The thing I like about this is everything you do in this game gives you more. You take an action, you get 3 extra things out of it. You go ahead and do this, well, you get that too. You go ahead and cross this star, well, you get another bonus over here. You want that dice, well, someone else is buying it from you, and they're going to go ahead and pay you like a star or money or whatever it is to go ahead and get it. Everything in the game continues to reward you, which is why I find this one so satisfying to continuously play and dive into. Encyclopedia is my number 40 on this list. My number 39 is, well, there's a lot of boxes for this, but I'm just going to show you one over here, and that's going to be Marvel United. Marvel United, which I don't remember the exact lists on this one, but I believe it was lower even, I think it was even lower, which is higher, depending how you look at it. This is higher ranked on my list around 2 years ago. Last year it saw a bit of a drop, and this year it's back up, although not to the highest of the highs, although part of that's just in general. When it comes to these lists, a game that is staying still actually means it's doing incredibly well because there are always new things entering the picture. Well, not always. If you're like number 2, there's not always a new number 1. But if you're number 40, there's always something kind of filtering in the middle. But Marvel United, over here I'm holding up Spider-Geddon, which is specifically my recommendation for the core set that I think gives you the best Marvel United feel. I think Marvel United and Marvel United X-Men, I think their core sets don't give you the full experience. I think Spider-Geddon escalates in complexity in a way that does make it feel more like the Marvel United experience for me. That said, I have everything. I have box after box. I have the full Season 1, the full Season 2, I have the full Season 3 coming, and of course I have Spider-Geddon. I have some promos for this stuff. You never need promos. You never ever need promos. But the basic idea of Marvel United is it's an incredibly light game. It is an incredibly light game. Even the variety of expansions you have for this only mix it up so much. Well, they mix it up a lot, but they don't increase the difficulty of the game. This is basically a little light party game with, not party game, a little light game with chibi miniatures where you're going ahead and playing cards, and the cards you play are going to determine the actions you take, but then I can play a card after your card, and then I can benefit from your actions, and you can play a card after my card, and you can benefit from my actions. And so there is a high sense of teamwork as you talk to your players and try to figure out, well, do we need more movement? Do we need more might? Do we need more superhero prowess? What is it that we need? And which actions and which special cards will help us in this puzzle? Meanwhile, you're facing off against dozens and dozens of villains. You're going round robin around this whole little board over here. You have your central boards. You can have this card line, which you could play that way. You don't have to. But effectively, you're going to be trying to take down the villain, which is a large variety of villains. And there's a large variety of game modes. As you have expansions for the game, there's ways you can play the game in episode arcs of going through like an entire Thanos Infinity War, or taking on the Phoenix 5, or dealing with a bunch of Sentinels. There are so many different ways to play the game, and to me they mostly are all fun, but they give you variety as far as how the gameplay experience is going to be. Ultimately, it is a lighter game, but it's a lighter game that I have played a lot, enjoyed a lot, have had a lot more fun with it than I ever thought I would. When I first backed this game, way back when the first campaign came out, I was like, you know what, my kids will enjoy it. My kids do enjoy it, I just probably enjoy it more. That's going to be number 39, Marvel United. Number 38 is another Command game, and the only other Command game on this list over here, that's going to be Master of the Universe, the board game from Command Games. This makes, I don't even know, this is like the 7th Command game we've had on this list. We had 3 in that one video, 2 in this, 1 at the top. This is either the 6th or the 7th, I want to say, Command game on this list, and there are still more to come. I wonder how many, like, does Command have like 10 of my top 100 games of all time? I have to think about it. Also, it depends how you count it, because honestly, Master of the Universe over here, the first thing I'm going to say about this game before going into it is coming in at number 39. This represents both Master of the Universe, but it also represents the World of Smog, Rise of Moloch. One of the things I talked about at the beginning of this series is the fact that I am bundling games that effectively are the same game to me, and to me, Master of the Universe, the board game, Clash for Eternia, very much has the same feel as the World of Smog, Rise of Moloch. Now, it is very worth considering owning both. I think they are both different in terms of what they do, but to me, this very much replaced World of Smog, Rise of Moloch, which historically has been in my top 100, well, I want to say every single year, and Master of the Universe is taking over that spot. Not necessarily because of the IP, I'm not actually a Master of the Universe fan, and we'll talk about the game itself shortly, but more so because of the single-shot nature of the game, just makes it so much more accessible than the World of Smog, Rise of Moloch, which does have a single-shot mode, but is more specifically meant to be played in 6-episode arcs. And so the Master of the Universe, the board game, Clash for Eternia from Command, is basically a game in which you can play it cooperatively, competitively, solo. You can go through this game experience, but you're basically taking on 2 different sides. You're taking on either, like, you know, He-Man and all his allies, or Skeletor and all his allies, and you're trying to accomplish various goals because there's a ton of scenarios to play through, but you just have tons and tons of abilities. One player takes on the side of the evil mastermind, kind of, you know, sucking power from the heroes and utilizing that power to power up all their actions and their core extra actions, additional card play and all that, and basically drive their forces forward. Meanwhile, He-Man goes ahead and can spend their power. Well, it's not really He-Man because you can mix up sides. The Master of Shadows type character could be the He-Man side as well. The game has a lot of flexibility, tons of powers and abilities, tons of miniatures, tons of just like, this is the board you'll be playing on. You'll be going through a bit of a skirmish mode as you manage your card over here. This is going to be the dark side, whatever. Again, it's not really a dark side, but the Master of Shadows types. I don't even know there's a name. There's a name for whatever the side is over here. But you'll be facing off of that side, utilizing their abilities, putting more units out on the board. There's tons of characters, tons of abilities, tons of fun things in this game. Master of the Universe Clash for Eternia gives you incredibly rewarding skirmish gameplay with a lot of scenario stuff that keeps the game interesting and alive, and just a smorgasbord of powers and abilities to go through, a ton to keep you interested for a very, very, very long time. And then you have my number 37. 37 over here is going to be Ticket to Ride Legends of the West, or Ticket to Ride Legacy Legends of the West. This is Legacy Ticket to Ride. This came out this past year, and I finished it. I plan on playing through it again, make no mistake, but I have finished this one so far. It is currently on the list. Going back to how these lists are done over here, anything that is not really in my collection, I don't really consider for my top 100 games of all time. This list is not the best games ever. This is the games I most want to play, which has a high correlation to the best games ever, at least in my opinion. But there are some games that do leave my collection. Pandemic Legacy is a fantastic game. It's one of those games that I've played through Pandemic Legacy Season 1 twice, Season 2 twice, Season 0 once. That's 5 games of Pandemic Legacy. That's a lot of Pandemic Legacy. That's 100 plus plays-ish. Maybe a little less because you didn't always take 12. 100-ish plays of Pandemic Legacy in my belt. I think it's fantastic. I also don't currently have it in my collection, and I don't know the next time I will, and so for me, it temporarily does go off the list, at least until it's back in that circumstance. Versus Ticket to Ride Legacy over here is recent enough that I do want to talk about it. I want to talk about this game and tell you how much fun I've had with it this past year, but also, it's still a game I plan on diving into more. I want to go through this again, but this time I want to go through it with a full 3 or 4, not full, a 3 or 4 player count, because I played the intro scenario at 4, and then I started again, playing through the whole thing at 2, and as much fun as it is at 2 players, I want to see how the game is at a 3 or 4 player count, especially if you're going to be considering playing it as an ongoing mode, which changes up the way you interact with the game. But this is basically the Ticket to Ride that you know and love, with some small little rules changes to it that make it just slightly different, at least for your first game. But then as you go through the experience, you're going to unlock more content, and unlock more content, and then get more content, and get more content, and slowly but surely you're going to be building out the map of the US while you go ahead and get more and more content and rules and adjustments. Like many Legacy games, there are scenarios that I feel are a bit fiddly as opposed to, as streamlined as they could be. The nature of building rules upon rules upon rules, and in the case of Ticket to Ride, the way they give you the freedom and the agency to build upon the rules yourself. So the order that you build upon things, you have a degree of control over. But that means that less control over the experience means that sometimes you could have a little bit more wonky of an experience too. So it's not a perfect game, not by a long shot, but it is one of those Legacy games that I wanted to power through, that I wanted to do the next one, and the next one, and game, and game, and game, and game, and I'm already ready to play it again. I haven't felt this strongly about without a Legacy game since playing the first Pandemic Legacy and being sucked into just wanting game after game after game as I went through the experience, had a lot of fun, played through Pandemic Legacy, and now here we are with Ticket to Ride Legacy, Legends of the West from Days of Wonder, and yeah, it's a good game. My number 37 to be specific. My number 36, be mindful over here, my number 36 is going to be, where are we? Bruges over here. Bruges from Stefan Feld, the another Stefan Feld game on this list. I wonder if he's the most prolific designer I have on this list. I'd have to go through all these things. I'm curious what I have. But Bruges over here, Stefan Feld has a bunch of games in my top 100. At the very least, he has 3, and there's a whole bunch more that are in my collection. Possibly more in the top 100. I think there's only 3. I think there's 3, but I could be wrong. But either way, Bruges... There'll be more. We'll figure things out. Bruges over here from Stefan Feld. This was rebranded, re-implemented as Cusco, I want to say, in the Queen Games City Collection. No, Cusco is Bora Bora. This is rebranded as Hamburg. Hamburg, right? Hamburg in the City Collection. It's so hard keeping track. Keeping track of all these things, when you change the names of games, like, it's a lot. Anyways, over here, Bruges is going to be a... How do you explain this game? It's a game with multi-use cards. In the game, you're going to have cards, and the cards are going to let you do so many different things. You can use the card as a house. You can also use the card as a person who goes into the house. You can use the card for their role and their ability. You can use the card to build canals. You can use the card to sell and trade in for money. You can use the card for so many different things in the game, and you're trying to figure out what actions are you going to take every single round, and how are you going to utilize these multi-use cards while you try to find the 17 different ways to score points, because there are so many ways to score points. The City on this Win expansion adds even more to the experience, giving you even more ways to score points, even more things to be mindful of. Now you don't just care about 1s and 2s and 5s and 6s, but you also care about the 3s and the 4s, because the 3s and the 4s are going to drive the ships and activate those, and those give you just fun extra abilities, but it also gives you other things to be mindful of as you go through it as well, including new cards, new animals, a whole new pet module, there's a whole little like stock kind of module. There's a bunch of things going on in this game, but ultimately it just gives you multi-use cards, a ton of ways to score points, and ultimately it's up to you to try to find the combination of things that you think will drive your engine forward, which I've noticed over this past year. One of the things I've learned about myself in 2023 is that a very common type of game that I like is when you give me a game structure and then you give a million cards that break that game structure in different ways. So the structure is preset, but the cards and the combinations of how I will define my own powers and abilities, my own ways that I can do things and combine things and do this and use that ability and this there, that gives me a sense of agency over, like, I can continuously dive down and try to find the most interesting ways to combine within this system, within this structure. And so Bruges over here, love this game over here. This is the, I have not tried the new Hamburg one. I plan on getting it at some point, or trying it at some point. I should say trying more than getting it, because I mean, I don't know if I'll like it more. I like the art, the presentation of Bruges far more than I do Hamburg, but I'm willing to give Hamburg a shot at some point and see whether it's a game for me. For right now, Bruges is the game on my table. Coming at number 35, we have Mythic Mischief. Mythic Mischief from IV Games. I love this game. This is one of my favorite abstract games ever. This is one of my favorite two-player games in general. This gives you, well, it's an abstract game, mostly, sort of, but it also has asymmetrical powers and abilities, so there is that thing to be mindful of as you go through this. I don't even know if I can show you this. The board section is so tiny over here, but let's go ahead and show you this. This is going to be the board you're playing as. You're playing basically as schoolmasters, trying to be mindful. Well, that's more the Blitz mode. There's a whole different thing. Over here we go. Here we go. This is the board you're playing with. You're going to have your powers and abilities of the two sides over here. You're going to have that little grid that you're trying to play off of as you move your characters around, because effectively you're going to be earning upgrades on a regular basis that are going to upgrade your movements, your ability to move the tome keeper, the schoolmaster, the headmaster, the tome I don't remember the names. I never remember the name of it. The librarian. They have different names for it because they also have an expansion too. The hedge master, the hedge keeper, the hedge librarian, the hedge tome master. Anyways, that giant person in the middle of the board over there, you're going to be trying to move them around to try to capture students, to put them into detention. So you're upgrading your abilities, you're upgrading your movement, you're upgrading the way you can manipulate other students, the way you can manipulate walls in the game, because there's going to be constant walls that will affect the patterns and the pathways that the librarian is going to take as they try to move from location to location. And you're trying to utilize a bunch of abilities to try to create a situation in which you can capture as many of the opposing team as you possibly can. The game also has an app which makes it easier to dive into than ever. And a big part of the reason why I've played this game over 50 times this year alone. Make no mistake, a good 20 of those have been in person as well. This is a game experience I like, a game experience I play frequently. I like it best as a two-player experience. I do enjoy the four-player blitz mode with a timer. It sets such some pressure on the game, but I think ultimately I still prefer it best as a two-player game where I can think through how can I optimize around the board state, how can I combine with the best powers and abilities, which factions play well off each other, how will I react to trying to stifle your faction as I start to learn how I would use your faction, faction, and I start to get better at being able to block yours. There's so much going on in this 2-player abstract game. The base game comes with like 4 factions, but then there's expansions, and then there's a new Season 2 stuff coming as well. There's a whole lot of Mythic Mischief to go through. It is a delightful experience, and my number 35 game of all time. My number 34 is going to be Cascadia. Cascadia is also, I would argue, abstract adjacent game, but it's a point scoring optimization game. In Cascadia, you're going to be drafting tiles. You grab tiles, which represents a tile and an animal, you pull them into your tableau, and you place the tile, the animal, either on the tile you just drafted, or on a different tile where you have space for that animal. Meanwhile, animals are going to score in different ways. There's 5 different types of animals, they each have a different way they score, and there's variable cards in the game that mean every single time you play, you can have different combinations of the way these things score. So it's not something that you just like play a few times and you're like, okay, I know how to play. You have to play it dozens and dozens of times. You figure out, well, if I have those hawks with that bear, with that deer, how are those going to combine in the most efficient scoring possibility, being mindful that the other players at the table are also trying to score around those and are trying to take their own tiles as well. Meanwhile, as you build out different habitats, you also score for the size of each of your largest habitat in the, I want to say 5 different types of habitats that there are. There's a lot to consider in this very rules light but strategy deep game, and it also has excellent solo play. This is one of those games, I think I've gone through the entire thing solo, and I want to continue going through it. There are a handful of games that I play competitively and still enjoy the solo to this degree. This is one of them. Games like Calico, Cascadia, I want to say Keystone North America, Trailblazers. There's a handful of games that really give me both strong competitive and strong solo play. Usually for me it's one or the other, not both. That's going to be my number 34. My number 33, on the other hand, is going to be Revive, which is a heavy box because it has the expansion in it. This is Revive from Aporta Games, and this is one of the fun Euros that I found this year, and there are a bunch. There's more coming up on this list. But Revive gives you almost a archaeological vibe as you're in the wilderness trying to find various remnants of civilizations, but meanwhile you have your own asymmetric powers from your own civilizations, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to optimize your score around, well, your own private scoring card, and then the public scoring things as well, just in general trying to be mindful of the different sections of the board and how to just get as many points as possible, both in-game and end-game. And to do that, every turn you have 2 actions. You're going to use those actions to move around to new locations, to kind of have a distance of getting access to new tiles, to be able to build buildings on tiles, to be able to put people on tiles, to be able to flip tiles so you have the possibility of building buildings or putting people on tiles. And there's a bunch of things you're trying to do, but it all comes together beautifully in this card combo mashup. I mentioned already with Bruges the idea of being able to utilize cards around a framework, and while I would argue that the strongest part of Revive is in the core idea of the game itself as opposed to the way the cards augment it, it does have that card augmenting aspect where you're like, okay, great, this is what the game lets me do, now what cards can I build and pull into my tableau to be able to activate them on my central board. This does have a bit of a table hog presence to it, especially at larger player counts. Your own private board is its own just giant board, especially if you do it the way the game technically wants you to do it as opposed to being space efficient. This is a game that takes up a lot of space, but it gives you a lot of meaty, crunchy, rewarding decisions to go through as you play through it. That's going to be my number 33, Revive. My number 32 is Dune Imperium. Now this is dropping from last year. I think it went as high as... Did it go as high as 13 last year? Or was that a different game? Maybe 17? This was high up on my list last year. It saw a big jump. And make no mistake, it's still high up on my list. But again, things move around. Things get played. The other things get affected. I played this with Immortality as well. Didn't love the Immortality expansion. It wasn't bad. It didn't make the game worse, but it didn't make the game better for me. There's Rise of Ix saw it shooting majorly up my list from like 80 to like 17. Some huge jump on my list. This over here is Dune Imperium. A part of the trifecta of worker placement deck building games that have become somewhat popular. I know there's lots of people who are like, Endless Winter and Lost News of Arnak and Dune Imperium are nothing alike, and then there's other people who are like, those are basically the same concept just with different executions. Whichever camp you're in, I see the similarities. I do compare those games, and for me, Dune Imperium is delightful. Rise of Ix in particular pushed it heavily up my list as far as how much I enjoy this game, but to me it's still a 3+ player game. It's still a game I'm going to pull out at that 3+ player count. Honestly, ideally at the 3-player count exactly. That's why I enjoy this one the most. I have not yet played Dune Uprising. Those who want to know, I haven't played it. I do have it pre-ordered. I'm waiting for it to show up, but I have not played Dune Uprising, at least not yet. But Dune Imperium gives you an excellent meaty experience of building out a deck, getting the right combination of cards, being able to lean into the various factions on the table, while being mindful of the worker placement spots. Rise of Ix in particular does a great job of breaking my main concern with the original game, and I love the original game out the door, but to me it was in my top 80 or so, and not my top 20, while many people loved it even more than I did. And for me, my biggest problem with the original loop was that I felt that it was a little bit too circular. You know, you get the spice, you get the water, you get the water, you get the troops, and circle around. I think it's the other way around. You get the water, you get the spice, you get the spice, you get the troops. It felt a little bit more specific as far as the rotation of resources, and I felt Rise of Ix did a lot to break up those core patterns and give you more flexibility to be able to still operate within the patterns when you wanted to, but to be able to have other avenues available to you. I like when a game gives me more choices and less locks me into a cycle I have to play through, and so Rise of Ix took a great game and made it even better for me. Immortality, I don't mind. I'm not against Immortality. I just don't think I'd ever care. If you're like, hey, can we play Dune Imperium without Rise of Ix? I'd be like, ugh. If you said, could we play Dune Imperium without Immortality? I would not blink an eye. I think my biggest frustration would be like, do I have to weed out some cards from the deck? Like, that kind of thing would bother me. The actual gameplay of Immortality, to me, it's take it or leave it. It doesn't add anything bad, it doesn't add anything good. It's just fine as is. That's going to be Dune Imperium, my number 32 game of all time. Which brings my number 31 game of all time, which is a small box title over here, and that's going to be Skulls of Sedlec. Which somebody accurately pointed out when I covered Sprawlopolis in my like top 80 or whatnot. I said it's like the only button shy game on this list, and someone commented and said, "Oh, no Skulls of Sedlec," and I was like, it's the only button shy game I remember at this current moment on the list. Skulls of Sedlec is on my list. This is my number 31 game of all time. I love this button shy game. I find it so variable, so adaptable, so many expansions that mix up the gameplay to keep it constantly fresh and interesting. But honestly, this is a game I'll play dozens of times without needing it to be mixed up. I just like this simple process of having a bunch of cards on your table, starting to grab cards, and building out your own little, somewhat morbid pyramid structure of skulls, and then scoring based on how those skulls all touch each other. That's basically what's happening. It's just you have a bunch of skulls, they all score in different ways. Some score based on their levels, some score based on the things below it, some score based on the things that are actually touching them. They all score in different ways, but you're just trying to draft the best combination. As you add in expansions, there gets to be even more decision space going on, although depending how you add the expansions, you either want to add them in one at a time, or do it the way I do, where you add in a bunch, but you also house rule and have 9 piles of graves instead of 6, and you're able to turn over 3 a turn. It gives you more agency to control for the chaos. The sad reality, as much as I like playing with a bunch of the expansions, if you have too many of them, it can become a bit chaotic. Also, if you really want to have fun, you can also go ahead and play with all the expansions or a bunch of expansions and start building out larger pyramids too. Larger pyramids, 9 piles, picking 3. There's things you can do to make this absolutely chaotic of an experience. Or you could just go with the base game, which is the thing I fell in love with in the first place. This is a small 18 card game that can be expanded to have, I don't even know the card count, but I don't know, 50, 60 cards, still not crazy, and gives you an absolute ton of gameplay, regardless of which way you choose to dive into it. That is going to be Skulls of Sedlec, my number 31 game of all time. And that's going to end the 7th video in the series. We have 3 left to go, which means we're down to our last week. We're down to our last week. One more week of the top 100 until we see it again next year. 51 weeks, 50-ish weeks from now, I guess, something like that. Anyway, this has been numbers 40 through 31, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.